I love that scribble animation so much. It's so good.
It's so funny how like that has survived for a really long time as
Yes.
a thing. It's like as soon as we put that in, it's like, ah, this is gonna work. This is great. That is probably one of like the oldest unchanged
Yeah.
visual elements in the game, actually.
It's definitely stood the test of time.
For sure. Yeah, presentationally very impressive, this one. I really like how the enemies are all like sort of black and white and everything too.
Yeah, that was a really like that is another kind of decision that was made pretty early on, because one of the things we heard as we were playtesting was with a multiplayer game like this, like 3D multiplayer where it's third person, the game is quite like there's a lot of going on. There were so many times where like you turn around a corner and just shoot your ally because it's like, hey, something's moving,
Yeah.
I gotta shoot it, and making sure that we had very clear differentiation between the player characters and the enemies. And so like, okay, if we just reserve black and white for enemies and no player stuff is ever allowed to be black and white, is that enough? And that has turned out to be like very clearly, like we never hear that issue anymore of like, great, I know exactly where the enemy is, what the enemy is.
Yep.
And I think that decision of like just reserving an entire color palette only for enemies has really helped. We had a concept called like the T test, where it's like if you see a projectile fly past your corridor, like you can't see who shot it or who's being shot at, you want to know that that's an enemy projectile. And so like that black and white mechanism really worked well for that.
It was really nice too to help us kind of cement a couple early decisions. Where at the same time as we were trying to figure out, hey, how do we make things noticeable? Getting that theming of, hey, the enemies are black and white. Hey, what if our abilities are actually ink based? And then what does color do to get different? To lean on sort of the feelings of classical elements that people are familiar with. Things like blot kind of starts to spread a little bit like fire, and you sort of get some of those like feelings that feel familiar when using magic in games, but being able to convert and say, hey, if we know that the enemies are black and white, they're not using colorful ink. How do we start to use colorful ink? What does it mean for us to be fighting for the color of the worlds that we're jumping into? And then that sort of starts to cascade into, well, what does it feel to really be blue? What does blue feel like? What does green feel like? How do you design a signature ink like red that's aggressive, that feels selfish? And it's like, well, getting into health and leeching and stuff, by being able to lock into what the enemies are, we help to kind of define ourselves in comparison, and that's been a really helpful and old cornerstone to help us figure out kind of the central conflict of these guys are getting stronger, but here you've got this ink. Dive deeper into it.
Yeah, I really like the theme of the game as well. I think it's really unfortunate for it that Inkbound released recent-ish.
Yeah, we did.
Like, man, that's such a unique theme, and both these games come out. It's like, oh no.
It's really funny when the universe decides to be funny, Like, just a strange coincidence. We think that there are a lot of people who like games like Hades and like games like Risk of Rain 2 who would also like this. But at the same time, hearing the things like, yeah, this isn't actually really like Risk of Rain, because in doing research and playing a lot of games, when you see the comparisons to things of like, I really like a lot of aspects of Hades and Risk of Rain and Gunfire Reborn and all of these games that are inspirations to us. But then being able to hear, yeah, here are the things we're doing that we didn't see in those games, and that's part of why we built this game. Of in such a genre that's more and more saturated, of course, all the time, because it's a great genre and very flexible for indie teams. To see that and say, hey, we're just going to build the experience that we felt like we wanted to see and couldn't quite see ourselves in that exact same way. It's really nice for people to say, hey, actually, hold on, this has some extra stuff going on that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear that. That's exactly it's like my favorite feeling to hear about from people. Especially as a third-person shooter, which is relatively untapped, which is why that Risk of Rain 2 comparison is so. I think it's the best closest thing that a lot of people have to really compare it to. And at the same time, is super interesting. There was one article, and then a couple other comments that were like, "Yeah, this is kind of MOBA-y," and we're like, "Wow!" Like, we were inspired in a lot of ways by something like Heroes of the Storm, because we absolutely love that game, have played days and days worth of it. But then to look and say, hey, there are people who really like Smite, and they see themselves, they see what they're looking for in kind of that third-person action, and realizing, okay, we can be getting these references from cross-genre, but that nugget of play, that actual moment-to-moment gameplay is coming through in a language that we weren't really using to describe it internally, but is a great discovery to see from people who aren't as familiar, aren't as interested in the genre that we're releasing into with this, or that we're so heavily inspired by in a couple of areas from. So it's really cool to see what people take away from the game, from no matter where they're coming from. Depth of experience wise.
Guess I'll be tiebreaker here.
Tiebreaker.
I think this is the hard one, so we'll face it.
I realized I have a pretty awesome build where I'm throwing out 5 birds at once, and each bird has a chance to spawn more birds.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm automatically casting some birds. So I've got all these little eggs that are spawning more birds. I guess I'm talking a big game, and we'll watch my stats be pretty bad, but I feel like I'm doing quite a lot.
Oh gosh. Really happy that you guys went with arena-based rooms as well.
Yeah.
It just increases the gameplay pace so much.
Yeah, there's definitely a feeling of we would really like to be able to make bosses have fun, interesting mechanics, and there's kind of 2 ways to do that where the bosses don't feel either super unreasonable or you can't get that mechanic. Is one, make an arena per boss. That's what Gunfire does, but that means that you can't have that many bosses, because not only do you have to build the boss, but you have to build the whole arena to fit it. Or you can make the arenas there's some elements that are unique per area, but if the general structure is the same, then you can always kind of design a boss around hey, you're going to have this circular arena. There's going to be some high points, some low points, but a large amount of flat area. And so then we can build the boss mechanics to that area. Things like having the Golgor, who has his beams that spin around and you need to go around him, wouldn't really work if we were in a corridor map, because you wouldn't be able to move around him and things like that.
when you see a new page pop up, or you see a new, oh my gosh, we now can't heal as much, an enemy pick, you're playing the game in the same way that we make the game, where we have this really specific problem, or we now have this really specific boon. How do we build off of it? We now have a system to control pets. What can we actually do about that? There are some great super old quotes that if I tried to recreate them, I'd butcher them, but they talk about how limitations are like the actual best thing for creativity. Because you're forced into a corner. You have to pick one of these three choices. You have to figure out, hey, our elites behave like this. How do we make a whole tome? How do we make a whole thing about just elites? What are our limiting factors, and how do we squeeze something creative, something that's going to ask people questions that then are satisfying to answer, satisfying to discover answers to? And that's like what all of the good and best work days feel like for us. Of, oh my gosh, I see that new connection, that new thing you made. Here's how I tested and broke its limits. We make a lot of jokes about how we can use some things in unintended ways to get weird and creative results. But that creativity is exactly what I want to be playing. That's exactly how I play roguelikes. Let me see if I can make this thing weird. Let me see if I can force a build with this particular thing. Or use this challenge, use this enemy's buff against them. It's a really... I kind of have to sit back and laugh sometimes about how ridiculously aligned some of the feelings are of like, oh my gosh, I just got a new power, and actually that feeling is coming from Jonathan making a new tool that we get to use, and not I just picked up that my little inkling buddy can teleport and explode on people. But it's a very similar feeling, and it's I haven't had so much fun in running into problems and challenges in almost any other artistic practice in my life, and it's really like poetic at times in a really cool and satisfying way.
Yeah, there's a big value to, I think, the roguelike genre as a game to make that makes it very fun, because once you have the infrastructure in, and that does take a while to get there, but once you have that, adding new content that just expands all of the combinatorial value out of everything you already have, like, becomes such a fun experience of like just taking a couple hours and writing out a bunch of new upgrades for the player or upgrades for the enemies is a super fun and engaging process that does feel a lot like play.
Yeah, I was helping design items for a roguelike that my friend was developing, and we're just like, what's the dumbest ideas we have? We should do that. We have one of the items that was put in is like a freaking tornado of plungers. Just stupid stuff like that makes no sense.
Yeah, and one of the nice things, like, the genre has most of the players are totally accepting of that type of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
We're not making this big epic single player story content game where lots of things don't fit and are not believable, or to quote other review stuff, is like not realistic. It's like, this is not supposed to be realistic. This is supposed to just be fun.
Yeah, and that's one of the specific boons of the setting here. Of we kind of get to from both the ability side of the manifest ability that lets you shoot anchors and spin an inky
I was just about to say, like,
wheel.
that makes no sense in the context of this game, but who cares?
Exactly, and then you get the upgrade that fires an entire ship from it, and it's like that wouldn't exist if we were limited to, hey, you have lightning bolts and you have wind magic and you have
right.
You can shoot fire and ice. there's no ice ability that we know of that lets you summon an entire big icy ship. And being able to kind of unlock the silliness and creativity at the same time of let's lean on some known attributes. People know how to interact with this cool dog companion. They grow attached to it. They someone in our Discord said that they would buy a miniature of it, and it's like that relationship can't really happen if you're limited by the designs of the world that you have as being realistic or being too familiar.
That's true.
And so that's why, like, one of the big things about our tomes, and how exciting it is that we can come up with both something that's, hey, this is really cool, can we find good ways to expand on it? And we also have the vocabulary and tools to justify it. Hey, here's a whole bunch of upgrades about this thing. You want to place down an obelisk? What if we take it, I mean, to borrow what you just said, what if we take it to its dumbest extreme? What if we take it to its absolute silliest, and then, you know, bring it back a bit to where it works and I'm not inadvertently breaking the game? But, you know, that feeling of let's push a silly limit, because any one of these weird things could be somebody's new favorite upgrade that they look for, that they giggle at, and that it still makes sense that we're inside books doing weird things, fighting strange enemies, but we go back to the library every time. We get to go back and pick a new book, or we go back and level up and come back to the root of, hey, we're upping our ink, and really getting to bookend the whole strange process with these things that still make sense, that you still are a grounded experience of, hey, you get to go home and rest a bit, tinker, buy something new, get to do this cool stuff, and then you get to go explore and discover. Like, discover just being the ultimate word of how does, I mean, sorry, and back to our process as well, like the discovery process of how does this new weird thing open up a lot of doors, and how are we going to get a lot of creative value and flexibility from new things that are really exciting, and their boundaries, when we find them, are speed into those boundaries head first and crash into them and break stuff, which is also just super fun. It's super exciting when somebody, because like these tomes are meant to be defined enough to be just ambiguous enough for the mechanics to work, for the references to all work, without saying, hey, this book is this book. And to watch people play this Wolves tome and be like, oh, it's the two wolves inside you, or it's Skull and Hati, or it's this, it's that, and you know, everybody's right. And then they get to live out that little bit of these little moments of, yeah, I fed the dog and then it saved me type thing, or hey, I made a last stand and it felt like this thing, this reference. And really, the structure of this giving us permission to creatively chase those moments and see if we can curate those is super exciting, and that's one of the most exciting things about actually finally launching the game, is that people make connections that we didn't think of. People make build combos that we never saw, or they say, hey, this is a funny reference, and I'm like, what? I didn't know this was a reference, and I wrote this, you know? And so when looking at future content, looking at the connections that people are seeing, that people in the community are reading between the lines, or saying, hey, it'd be really, really cool, I'm really, really missing this, we get to put them in the same place that we were when we were looking at the roguelike genre. Hey, what are these other games doing really well that you want more of in this particular way? Do you as the community really, really, really like this Wolves tome? What other stories do you want to kind of be a bit of a tourist through and play around with and have this little miniature playground? Because, like you said, reading books is so personal, and people get so much stuff from so many different fables and myths and legends and great American novels like the Moby Dick tome. Like, what would that even look like? But we get to distill that and say, hey, what is it about chasing this one big thing for so long? What is it that this big monster that you're hunting, what does that feel like? What's the essence of that? And how do we turn that into game mechanics that give people that same sense of there's this big bad out there that's interacting with my life? And so we end up with the Quarry tome, where the big bad boss at the end is influencing the entire journey to get to them. And that chasing that is something that is really, really satisfying for us, but it's also something that can come together pretty quickly. Something with the flexibility of a smaller team is that we get to spend 100% of our attention on that brand new, cool, awesome thing, and see if it works. And if it doesn't, we know pretty well, and now we get to lean on the community, and we're going to start to be in a position to throw some testing things on a testing branch and actually get, hey, is this tome hitting those aspirational feelings that you would want from the theme? Is this really, really clicking? And if not, like, how close are we? Because that's what we've been doing internally this whole time. So it's a lovely flipping of the switch to be able to look outside and get a lot of that feedback and see what connections people are making, and then say, oh wow, you're absolutely right. This should totally work like this. Fantastic call. And then just go make it. Welcome back. Things are scary.
Yeah. My damage is finally getting somewhere though, so.
Yeah, I was feeling a little low damage. I know we were talking about bullet sponge, but I hadn't been taking the damage I needed, but now I'm also starting to feel on top of it.
Whew. Good recovery in.
Yeah.
Let's read.
Ooh, I wonder. Yeah, clear the path. I like that one. I like seeing that.
Might also for ultimate reset for the next one.
Mm-hmm.
This one before the boss.
Ooh.
Hey, we already can't with him.
Yeah, it's a nice.
That's a nice gimme.
Whoa, how come I have so much mana?
Oh yeah, our the font has a little crystal to supply people with mana, and
Oh,
it shows you, so it just kept running back and forth, giving you some extra mana.
cool. Yeah, I saw that last stage and I thought it was damaging me. I guess that would be one, like, the most major feedback I've got at the moment is both being damaged yourself and enemies being damaged need a little bit of oomph to them, I think.
Yeah, that is definitely something that we've heard a fair bit and have on our list of things to juice up.
Oh right, there's a oh man. That's so mean. There's a second elite in this chapter. Oh, it's brutal. Again, who would do this? Who would do such a thing?
Oh, cruel.
How cruel. Yeah, you know, discovery. Sometimes you rediscover awful enemies you put in mean places.
Oh, I'm getting broke.
Ooh, I like that wall placement. That was pretty clutch.
Yeah, actually, to stop the pull from the elite.
Mm-hmm. Oof. All right, almost there. Surely the next one will be terrible.
I have Horus, so if everybody groups up, I can shoot out 4 quips at a time.
Ooh, that's crazy.
I do a ton of damage based on mana. The more mana I have, the stronger I am.
Nah, yeah.
Ah, very nice.
His primary build.
Yep.
Ooh.
Not morale boost.
That one needs some adjustments.
No. Yep. Ooh. Ah. Yeah. Yep. That's tough. That's tough. I don't want to do less damage. I want to do more damage. Right. Good luck. Oh, it's 3 of them?
Wait.
It's 3 of that guy? Oh, that is brutal.
We end this session and we see a small, like, couple megabyte patch come out. It's just like, yeah, we made it so that can't happen.
You know what? That guy, he's just not gonna be here anymore.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's so many beams! Oh my god. Alright, well,
great.
that's great. Like,
Good job.
yeah. Ooh. Well, you got to see something entirely brand new.
I've never seen this. That's crazy.
Oh, jeez. Oh, it's you know, it's a random selection of the elites for this first wave of this fight, and so we just got super lucky / unlucky to get
Yeah, exactly.
exactly. With some magic extra bad guys just thought, you know what? They don't have near enough orbs.
Oh man, if we had seen a William Bullet enemy upgrade, that would have been pretty easy.
Oh. All right, we're doing good. We're doing good. We're at 100 stacks of the thing, so they're taking full damage now.
Yeah, me and a friend were talking about apparently Linus Tech Tips had he was telling me about how he has contact with the YouTube people, and he's like, well, how'd the algorithm work? And they're like, we don't frickin' know.
Yeah.
It's like, we just don't touch it because we don't know.
We're making good progress.
Yeah.